Transgender and Autism, a rich combination of two spectrums. We're dancing, aren't we, Tobias?
Yeah, it's good music.
I like it. It's happy. Okay, everybody, we are here. I'm Kirsten Hunter. We're here with Signpost for Living with Dr. Kirsten Hunter, and I'm here with a very dear person here, Tobias Hakanson. Have you ever been on a podcast before?
Nope, definitely not.
What did you think when I asked you?
I was a little bit surprised. I definitely wasn't expecting it. Closest I've ever had was a fake news report in high school, so...
Well, there you go.
Yep.
We'll have fun. Mm-hmm. We'll have fun. Okay, everybody. So, Tobias, let's get into talking. We're talking about transgender and autism. Now, I have a lot of clients with transgender and I have a lot of clients with autism. I have not come across somebody with that combination, and that's why I invited you along, because I thought, what a wonderful area to, and you're such a sweetheart to come in, because, you've had a very unique journey, and I think we can learn about both of these areas and how they interact. I think it's a very unique situation. Of course, you're not the only one, but it's probably not overly common population-wise, I'd guess.
Oh, yeah, it's two pretty rare-ish sort of things, and both intersecting is not very common, but there's definitely a lot of people with autism who are transgender.
Absolutely, and they'd be very underrepresented, of course.
Yep.
So us coming and talking is really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me a bit about yourself. So how old are you? You're at school?
Yep. So I'm 17 and I'm currently going to high school still. I'm a prefect at my school and I live with my mum, 2 younger sisters, 3 birds, because that's sort of my special thing.
Yeah, you love your gorgeous birds, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
And Noodle is the highlight. Noodle is a cockatiel that has got too much personality.
Definitely.
And who's the boss? Your Noodle.
Depends on his mood.
Yeah, absolutely. So for people who are, international, we've got year 12, that's the senior year.
Yep.
So you're going to be out of school in how many months?
Graduate in November, so that'll be...
4 or 5 months, yeah.
Yeah.
And you're a prefect, so that's a position of leadership.
Yep.
Which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm, definitely. I was very surprised to get the position.
Yeah. And I'd love to come back to talk about your confidence now versus before you'd really worked out your gender.
Yeah.
So that'd be great. Okay, so let's talk first of all, if you don't mind, about autism for you. Now, you're 17 now.
Mm-hmm. How
How old were you when... Well, if you don't mind, I'd love to hear how you figured it out and what that meant to you and how old you were.
It's kind of hard to remember. I think I might have been around 13 or 14 when the word autism even came into my life.
So you weren't familiar with that concept?
Very vaguely, as in like a very distant cousin had autism, and that's kind of all I got told. I didn't have any idea what the symptoms were or what the experience was at all.
Sure. And before you came across the term autism and understood it, did you have a sense that something was, a bit different for you than the general population?
Yeah, definitely. I felt like a complete outsider amongst my peers and stuff like that. So, yeah, definitely knew something was wrong.
How far back do your memories go, do you think?
I can remember as far back to primary school. I had kind of a group of friends I hung out with, but it was never really close or a strong connection, and there was a lot of times when I was just kind of the outsider listening in. But I have been told when I was younger that definitely an outsider amongst younger groups before I even went to school.
Right. And your mum would have lots of stories?
A few here and there, but not really something that comes up too often.
Right. There you go. And did the world make sense to you growing up? Were people a bit kind of peculiar to you? They didn't really...
There were definitely situations where people would do stuff and I was just like, what do you mean?
You don't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Cannot process. Okay, so 13, you said?
Perhaps? Yeah, around that age.
Yeah, approximate's fine. And what did it mean to you when you heard this diagnosis and the various presentation of that?
So it's kind of complicated. It wasn't actually me who was getting diagnosed. It was my younger sister. So her symptoms are a lot more obvious than mine because she also has ADHD. And when I found out about it, it was when she was getting a diagnosis. I remember I was sitting in the car with my mum, and I think probably my sister's in the back seat with me, and my mum and my cousin in the front seat. And they were talking about how Freya was getting a diagnosis for autism. I was like, what's that? And everyone went silent. I was like, what's autism? And they just kind of went, oh, it means you get funding from the government, I guess. So no one could give me an answer.
Was that the response?
Yep.
That was probably mum thinking, oh, fantastic, I'm going to get some support from my daughter.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So I went home and, being autistic, I searched what autism was, and really not that much on the internet, like not anything that was easy to digest as a 13-year-old. It was...
Yeah, there's lots of diagnostic language, very medical. That's true.
And the best thing you could really get was autistic girl, like solves puzzle or something like that, something stupid along those lines. But I managed to piece it together and I was like, Mum, I think that's me. And it was absolutely a battle to try and get an autism diagnosis, even through my mum.
Really?
Yeah, because at first, in her mind, it was very much autism was this big, scary, terrible thing. Because you had to, struggle to get my sister to bed. Sometimes my sister had massive meltdowns. So when I came to her saying that I thought this was me, it was nope, no way. I can't have another autistic child. So
I don't want to hear that, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. But eventually she kind of caved in and we saw one doctor and, that was the start of it. Not a very good doctor at all. And the second doctor we saw, thankfully, was a lot better. Not a very good therapist.
There you go. I mean, we've known each other for a few years, and when I first met you, in a moment's glance, I realised you had autism.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting, isn't it, that when people really work in that field, they can see some of those indicators and it, from my perspective, well and truly enjoy them. Because you said I can't remember what you said a moment ago, realised there was something wrong or there was a problem. I don't see it that way. I don't. I see it as a different version, and I find it people with autism to be, and I don't mean to sound like an idiot here, but just truly delightful. I don't know if I've ever told you, but my favourite grandparent had autism. Have I ever told you that?
You might have.
Yeah, my favourite grandparent had autism, and I have a cousin as well, and I don't know him very well, I must admit, but I enjoy him when I get to see him. So, yeah, I've got a soft spot, and I also think that people with autism make a lot more sense than neurotypicals often, because people with autism, and we should talk about that for a minute. So for listeners who aren't familiar with autism, it's probably a really hard area to explain. How would you explain it if you meet people and they say, okay, what's autism? What?
It's definitely hard to explain what autism is, because one autistic person can be totally different and experience a totally different level of symptoms to one person.
Exactly. It's an umbrella term and it covers so many different presentations, but there's like a checklist and it's a case of how many do you have, and absolutely.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a spectrum. It's like an entire colour wheel, you kind of hit some spots more than others. Sometimes it depends on the day. But actually, I think one of the best ways to explain it was the way you explained it to me when we first met. It was a neurotypical person looks at a tree and sees the tree. An autistic person looks at a tree and sees all the leaves on the branches.
Yep, that absolutely. And it's all that stimulation, all that detail, and it can be overwhelming. So, so people with autism, they can be very literal. Not always. I'm going to say not always to everything. They can be very literal. They can struggle with being abstract, but again, not always. They can struggle with information overload with their sensory experiences. That can be their clothing. And I'm going to list this, and I'd love you to jump in and go, yes, that's me. With their clothing, with texture, with touch, with sound, visual, too much happening around them. So I've got one little person who absolutely goes ballistic if someone cuts paper. Cannot stand it.
Yeah, I definitely have some sounds like that, like people scratching their nails against paper. It makes me want to just grab the paper and just, stop that.
Yeah, yeah. Did you have any clothing issues when you were growing up?
Definitely tags, like tags on clothes. I actually have one shirt and the tag presses right against my waist and I always forget it. So I'll go walk around the shirt and be like, well, why is my waist itching? And just like keep pulling the shirt out and I'm like, it's this shirt.
Yeah, well, tags on clothes are very classic. And also, I would say number 2 classic is socks with the actual seam on the socks.
I never had an issue with that, but my younger sister definitely does, and it's the case of finding the perfect sock and,
Seamless socks. There's a thing.
Yeah.
So whoever came up with that is a smart person.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. How about you with sounds? Classrooms, lunch times. How do you go with the sensory?
It's very much a depends on the day thing. Sometimes I can, like on good days, I can, walk into a loud classroom, people yelling, concentrate, no issue. On probably I'd describe as normal days, it's very much the case of trying to concentrate on one thing, but, there's a sound going on behind me, sound going in front of me, teacher talking, people are talking about something on the other side of the room, I can hear all of it. And it's like not overstimulating, but just annoying because it's like, shut up.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Yeah, bad days, I can't hear the person talking next to me or talking to me because someone on the opposite side of the room started whispering and I can hear that and,
And with all of that information coming to the person, often they can't block out the grey noise to focus on that person to the left that you want to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I would say there's a specific word for it. I can't think of it at the top of my head, but not being able to hear one noise because there's too many noises going on around you is one of the biggest issues I have.
Yeah, you can't filter that out. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. What about people? I mean, another ASD trait, and we say ASD, Autism Spectrum Disorder, we just say autism, we've decided before, is that people might say something but mean something else. There might be ambiguity, there might be a vagueness in what they're saying. And a lot of people with autism really struggle to decode this very kind of, complex social communication, which, it makes sense because humans actually don't make a lot of sense a lot of the time. And there's a lot of intuitive feed going on. Have you had any struggles with that sort of thing?
Sometimes more than others. Growing up autistic, it was very much about learning how to spot these social cues and stuff like that. So sometimes, even if I don't understand why someone's doing that, I'll understand what they mean by that, but it's definitely a struggle to navigate that if they're not blunt about their feelings or, yeah.
So you've got to put some effort into decoding that.
Absolutely.
Does that ever get just exhausting for you? Does it ever get confusing or stressful?
Yeah, all the time, especially on bad days.
What's a bad day?
A bad day is maybe when I'm not coping so well, so I might get overstimulated easier, so, the textures of my clothes might be too much, too many sounds, whether or not it's like a normal amount of sound for that day. I might feel more emotional than normal, stuff like that.
Sure, absolutely. Some people with autism are very cuddly and affectionate. Other people really do not like touch. Mm-hmm. What have you observed there?
Again, for me, it depends on the day. I notice a lot of other people with autism definitely have an issue with touch, and it's very much has to be the right mood, right day, right season, temperature and everything for them to want to cuddle. But definitely, it doesn't change the fact they're really, kind people and stuff.
Absolutely. And change. Now, again, some do, some don't. Some people with autism, they really like routine, they like structure, they like predictability, and they don't cope with spontaneity, change of routine, change of physical items, that sort of thing. So life can be really tricky when there is a change going on, which might be a change of teacher, classroom, desks. Mum and dad suddenly say, hey, we're doing this now, change of plan, and the kid just, absolutely just has a meltdown because they can't process and it's just overwhelming. How about you? How do you go with change? Stepping out of your comfort zone?
The thing about change, it's kind of funny in a, not so funny way. Change doesn't always mean being the exact same way every time. So, for example, my way of not changing is that I don't plan ahead. So planning ahead might actually cause me stress because that's actually a change.
So to avoid the stress of change, you don't plan?
Sometimes, yeah. Also not having a routine to my day, having a routine that I have to stick to, which very strict hours can sometimes cause that sort of anxiety with change, but there's also cases where it's just, cold, hard change. Like, I remember specifically one time when I was younger, it was Christmas, and we usually drive around town and look at the Christmas lights. Oh, no, walk around town and look at the Christmas lights.
Sure.
But people didn't have the walk-in areas anymore, so you could go into a garage and you'd be surrounded by Christmas lights. They didn't have that anymore, so we decided not to walk, and I had a meltdown because I just hated that so much.
Changed the routine, the expectation.
Yeah.
And what does the meltdown look like, if you don't mind me asking?
It depends, like, a lot depending on each person. And from the outside, I believe it just looks like a tantrum, but on the inside it's kind of feeling out of control. It's too much sound, you can't handle it, you just kind of want to, break down crying. You might be really angry, you might be really upset. It's kind of comparable to a panic attack.
Sure, yeah, that real emotional overwhelm.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people with autism, they have this kind of, you probably explain it better than me, they have this energy they need to release. So they might do it with fidgets, they might do it through pacing, they might do it through active movement, and it's this like release. That's my understanding anyway. Or I've had one person say to me that they can cope with all of the overwhelm of all the stimuli if they can release that energy in one direction.
This is called stimming for an autistic person. So the most famous one is, the hand flapping, where you'd move your hands back and forth around your chest, which is as, common as any other stim. But it's definitely about having that stimuli that you can control and that you can have pinned down because that's yours. You can control that. You can stop it anytime you want. And, yeah, it's definitely something to focus on when everything else might be kind of going crazy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and for me and actually quite a few autistic people that I know, pacing back and forth, even if I'm not anxious, if I'm just happy, it just might be something I do, and I pace back and forth for hours.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And also used to have a trampoline?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I used to jump on the trampoline, which was like extreme pacing because it uses a whole different type of muscle. But issue with that is that trampolines break very quickly.
You must have been very fit.
Actually, not really. Good short-term stamina, but nothing long-term.
Okay, now we've already raised two other areas as well, and there's lots more, but we're covering the big ones. We mentioned Noodle, your gorgeous cockatiel. Mm-hmm. I don't know is a cockatiel an Australian bird?
Yep.
Okay, for people who are not in Australia, cockatiel is an absolutely gorgeous little bird that is very intelligent. The ones I know are yellow and grey.
Mm-hmm. But they can have a variety of different colours.
You are an expert on cockatiels, well and truly. And you have Noodle, and Noodle you've had for how many years?
4 years now. I got him when he was a month old.
What does... I guess I'm talking about what Noodle brings for you, and I don't know if you put in the category of a special interest, but people with autism often have special interests where they pick something and they're just absolutely absorbed. They absolutely love it. They dive in and, if you're going to have a chat with them, that's the topic to pick, and then they might not end. Now, that I don't think that's Noodle for you, is it?
Sort of is. It's not my main special interest, but it definitely was something kind of on the side. So whenever I learned about cockatiels, I'd remember that forever.
Right.
Yeah.
And what does Noodle bring for you?
He's definitely that sort of, he's really easy to understand compared to humans and quite predictable. Right. So if he wants to be picked up, he'll kind of raise his wings. If he's upset, he has feathers on his head, he pins them back and kind of hisses at you. And
So you've decoded, every time we've talked about Noodle, you translate for me what he's thinking, what he's doing, and it's extraordinary the level of detail you have pinned down for. It's like you speak bird. Actually, you do. Mm-hmm. You know.
Yeah.
What special interests do you have?
I've had one since I was 10 years old. I've been super into horror, and that's actually why I chose my name when I came out as trans. It was a specific horror character I was really into.
Really?
Yeah.
So you chose the name Tobias because of a horror character?
Yeah.
Didn't give you nightmares or anything?
No. Honestly, it was probably a way to cope at the time.
Really?
Yeah. It was weird when you think about it because I was like 10 years old getting into it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And earlier you said when you're in the car and you heard the word autism and like a true, person with autism, you went and you looked it up. What did you mean by that?
Well, being autistic is, definitely just kind of looking for knowledge all the time, especially if you don't have a special interest. So sometimes special interests just kind of fade away, and then your brain kind of looks for something else to kind of cling on to and use. And that was probably during that period of time. And, there's also just, I presume every human has this kind of interest to know more and more, just that need to explore and stuff.
Yeah. And what's been your family's response once they've kind of got on board and realised, okay, yes, this is real? Do you think generally the level of education around you in the school setting, friends, teachers, family, community, pros, cons, how do you think people are going with their inclusiveness, their education?
Specifically when my sister and I got diagnosed as autistic, a lot of my other family members started getting diagnosed, and
Really?
I've got like 30 people on my mum's side of the family. So, suddenly my 2 younger cousins were getting diagnosed with autism. My other aunt thought her son might have autism, even though both of them very clearly do.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and suddenly, it was my mum was suddenly pointing out how both my grandparents were very obviously autistic, stuff like that.
Yeah. And it's a real learning curve, isn't it, when you've got 2 siblings with autism? I've got 3 families I can think of in a moment, so I imagine if I spent time on it. Two lots of twins, okay? So one of them are young twins, and honestly, one of the boys' strengths is the other one's weakness, and the other boy's strengths is the other one's weakness. They are opposite, almost, present very differently. The other set of twins, also very, very different expression. And then I've got another set of siblings that I actually saw today, and again, very different expression. So I think that families can get confused, and they go, okay, we've got this one child come through, now we know what autism is. Next one comes through, well, that's not autism, you're different. And it really is that learning curve of that spectrum and the difference. And I think that's part of the celebration, really. I mean, how boring if we're all the same.
Yep.
Yeah.
On the same topic, even after a lot of us got diagnosed with autism, there was definitely still the older family members who still had their prejudice.
Prejudice, yeah.
Yeah. Just simply because the fact that older people are more resilient to changing, it just seems to be a very common theme.
So they're kind of reluctant to change, yeah.
Yeah, or even just accept it. Like, one time my grandfather was talking about how he couldn't stand to eat a food, just made him, feel really sick. And my mum just kind of laughed, was like, oh, I wonder where the autism in the family came from. He just kind of went silent.
Bit confronting for him, hey?
Yep, definitely. And, yeah, I've got older uncles, and they're your Australian men.
Yeah.
And they definitely haven't really took on too well to the whole, transgender autism sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you've given them a double whammy to, extend themselves.
Yeah.
Good on you. Okay, so good little transition there. Let's jump over to transgender. So tell me about, so you were born with a female body and a female name.
Yep.
And what was that like growing up? And obviously we're here talking about transgender, so there was a point where you said, no, actually, I'm not female. Can you tell me what it was like being female and when you started to kind of think, hey, I don't know if that fits me?
I've actually sort of kind of thought about this a lot, and thinking about it even as myself, it's kind of interesting because as a child I grew up on a boat and I was very secluded from social media, a lot of other children, a lot of typical influences. And since I was on a boat, it was like a fishing boat, so I'd have lots of men around me. But also, I'd be playing with, my pink little Barbie doll horse because that's what gave you a female child.
That's the toy you had?
Yep.
Yeah.
Barbie dolls, horses.
Did you play with the crayfish and did you play with
Oh, yeah. A bit gory, but I used to play with the dead fish's eyeballs. So,
of course
eyeballs
you did.
Eyeballs in one hand, pink Barbie doll in the other.
And you're into horror.
Mm-hmm.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, but I remember back then I would describe it as a very non-binary raising because it wasn't about the fact I was female. It's the fact that, I wanted to impress the older guys around me. I wanted to hang out with them and because they were like cool people.
Yeah.
Looked up to them. But going into school, it was definitely, I felt I had to present more femininely. I actually grew my hair out to around my tailbone at one point because I saw this girl walking past one time and I was like, I want to be a princess.
There you go.
Yep. So, yeah, I was very dedicated to being feminine until one day in grade 6, I was like, I had vaguely heard about transgender and I was like, what's the difference between transgender and transsexual? So, again, that autism thing, I searched it up and it was about on and off for a couple of years. I'd be like, oh, I must be transgender. I'd start biting my chest. I'd be like, no, that can't be me. Forget about it for a while, pick it back up again. And that sort of went on and on.
Is that because you didn't feel settled in your femininity or?
It's kind of hard to figure it out looking back because I can't really remember what my thought process was, but I was definitely scared to come out, kind of scared of how other people would react, scared I'd be making a massive mistake, stuff like that.
Sure.
And also maybe perhaps link back to that kind of fear of change.
Yeah, that's a very big change. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, and also at this time, my grandparents were also quite homophobic, and they're they're in the centre of my family, so if anything happens, they find out about it eventually.
Sure. And I completely believe you, but can you give me some ideas as to how you knew they were homophobic? What sort of language would you hear to reinforce that?
The only thing that can come up off the top of my head right now is one time my mum made sort of a joke like, oh, I wouldn't be surprised if all my kids turned out gay. And again, it was like going dead silent, them kind of like, crickets in the background going,
silence.
Okay.
This is not okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's interesting you just said homophobic, which is not being comfortable with homosexual relationships, but we're talking about gender.
Oh, those two are very, very interconnected.
Okay. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, actually, I've never met someone who is homophobic but not transphobic.
Okay, I get you.
Yep. So it's just that kind of rooted into conservatism, the idea that it must be that way because we've been practicing it that way, even though if you look into ancient history, there's lots of gay people, but...
So there's a word, transphobic.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. Okay, and so how old were you when you started to communicate with people and say, you know what, I think I'm male and I think I might want to start talking about this? When did you bring it into the world?
First, it kind of started on the internet. I wasn't comfortable saying I was female, which probably should have, woken something up in me. But, I was like always very hesitant to share my gender. But sometimes I'd present as male on the internet, sometimes as female, sometimes as neither, whatever happened. But I didn't actually tell anyone I wanted to present as male until I was talking with my, at the time, girlfriend, because they came out as lesbian first. Mm-hmm. And I think that was probably about a year before I came out. And I told her very, very briefly that, I kind of like asked her, like, do you ever feel like you just, might be male or something? And she was kind of like, nope. And I was like, where do I go with this?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And then we had a kind of bad breakup. And I was telling my mum we broke up. And that was just my kind of point of, I'm kind of done holding all this in. Yeah. And it was one of those spontaneous things. I didn't think about it. I just kind of, actually I was so nervous I had to text her when we were sitting in the same room.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was just kind of funny thinking about it, but I was so nervous.
Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? You're putting yourself out there and you're needing to know it's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And how did she respond?
She was, this is kind of funny. She was like, yeah, I kind of thought so.
She's like, yeah, and?
Yeah.
That's good. And so what happened from there? Like, how did you feel about sharing that with someone? Obviously, your key person, your mum.
Yeah. At the time, I was extremely nervous, but I was kind of like, it happened. I can't go back. I have to keep going forward now.
Yeah.
Because there's definitely the fear that, I might regret it later. And I just, shut back in my closet. So it wasn't so much the fear that I had to and now I had no choice, but the fact that I knew I wanted this and I had to keep pushing forward.
Yeah, and that's very courageous.
So from there, we kind of discussed what names I'd like to use. My mum's not very gender savvy, I guess you could say. So there's no question about pronouns or anything like that.
Well, I don't understand what you mean.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Even if I came out as trans, they could have been non-binary, meaning I could have preferred different pronouns and stuff like that. Or even if...
They, them.
Yeah.
Right.
There's also a whole range of other pronouns, but... Yeah. But yeah, then, I gave her my list of names, and I remember one, I was considering Brian.
Brian.
Another character from a horror series I really liked. And she heard Brian. She's like, nope, no way.
It's a very male name, Brian.
Yeah.
So you've got to have a low voice for Brian.
So then at the end I was stuck between Elijah and Toby or Tobias, because I always wanted to have a name where I could have a nickname.
Yeah.
Yep. So we decided on Toby in the end. And it was actually the next day she had to leave early or something, so she wrote us a quick letter just telling us where she was, and at the top she used Toby, and that was really nice.
Wow, that would have meant a lot to you. Mm-hmm. So then how did the ripple effect go from then with telling the world, and how did you go with sharing that with the world?
Well, next was my sisters, because they both live in my house and they're younger than me. So telling my second youngest sister, I was like, so do you think you can call me Toby? And she's like, are you transgender?
Yeah, straight up.
Yeah, and I was like, just I'm not ready for that conversation. But yeah, I ended up telling her, and she was like, okay. And I remember later she actually asked me what my pronouns were.
Really?
Yeah.
Good on her.
And then, so it was then telling my younger sister, and again, massive change. So she flat out refused, which ended up with this really awkward kind of area in the middle at one point, where she was refusing to call me by Toby. But I went into the female bathrooms because I wasn't comfortable going to the males yet. And she looked at me and she's like, why are you in the girls' bathroom? You're a boy.
There you go. So
Yep.
She was halfway there.
Yeah, which was extremely awkward at the time because, public swimming pool bathroom.
Yeah, but she's really come all the way now, hasn't she? Mm-hmm. You're very much Toby to her.
Yeah.
Which is lovely.
Yeah, and then I kind of actually had this sort of planned out. So I came out right before the end of term 3. And I told...
So that's September? Yep.
Yes, I think.
June, July. Yep.
Yep, that would be end of September. And so I got one friend, and she was very pro-LGBT+. And I was like, okay, I'm trans. And she was like, cool. And she's also a massive gossip. So the plan was that she'd tell everyone else.
That was the plan.
Yep.
A successful plan.
Yep, it kind of worked. So I also told lots of friends, sometimes over message, about it.
Which is safer for you.
Yeah, because some of them, even though we were friends, they weren't particularly good people sometimes.
Sure.
Yeah. Thankfully I'm not talking to them anymore. But, there was this one guy messaged like, hey, can you call me Toby now? And he was like, why? I was like, I think it's kind of obvious. He was like, no, I need you to tell me. I was like, I'm trans. And he was like, okay.
You just needed trainer wheels.
Yep.
Got it.
And so, yeah, then eventually told a few close friends and then some other people I was friends with. It was literally a case of one looked down at my timetable and was like, oh, that says Toby on it. Did you get the wrong timetable or something? I was like, nope. That was it.
So you weren't really open with generous explanation for anybody. You were just shooting out bits of information. They just need to catch up.
Yeah, which now that I think about it, it's kind of bad because a lot of my friends have actually told me now that they didn't know anything about transgenderism until I came out.
Right, so it was a big education for the school. And it's a pretty big school, isn't it, that you go to?
Yep, 1,500 people.
There you go. Were you ever fearful? Were you ever fearful of people who were judgmental or who were, thugs, any of that kind of thing?
Oh, definitely. There's definitely been cases where I'm like, am I safe here? Really? Yeah. Mostly in the school bathrooms because at a public school you've got a whole mix of people. But there have been times when I'm in the bathroom and I'm sitting down doing my business, people slamming on the door, like, oh, hurry up in there or whatever. I'm like, if I go out there, I really hope they don't attack me or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also the case when I had my name changed in the school, but I wasn't using the male bathrooms yet. It was a case of standing in line, with females. I'd have a flat chest, hair cut short, and the girls would look at me and be like...
In a boy's uniform?
Yeah. They'd look at me like, what are you doing in here?
So how stressful was that for you?
I mostly avoided going to the females' bathroom, but at one point I was like, whatever, I'll just own this. If I'm in the females' bathroom, they don't like it. That sounds like an issue for the school.
Good on you.
Yeah.
Good on you. So would you say you were becoming more confident through this process?
At the time I didn't feel like it, but looking back at it, I definitely feel like I was getting more and more confident.
Why? I mean, you're doing something that's got you going out on a limb relative to the population, which I think is just so cool. And yet you were getting more confident.
Mm-hmm. I feel like it might have just been that kind of flick in my head. It's like, well, there's lots of people out there who hate trans people, so whatever I do, I'm going to get judged. So I might as well just kind of go for it. Yeah.
That is so great. Do you think that being male was also better for your confidence because it was more true to who you were, whereas when you were female, you were not. I mean, my memory, if you don't mind me saying, is that okay?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so when you were, before you transitioned, my memory of you was you were quite a mouse, and now you're a lion.
Yep.
The comparison is not subtle at all. You're in a leadership position. You've just gone put yourself forward for, the musical and different kind of getting out there. You're a mentor. You stand up for people. You wouldn't have done that before. My memory when you were female is you were very much stick in the shadows.
Yeah. I definitely feel like I still have anxieties, but thinking about it compared to back then, I definitely think coming out as trans definitely lifted a weight off my mind.
Right.
Yep. And I feel more confident in who I am presenting in public now more than I ever was, because I remember it was kind of like having massive panic attacks. Like I felt like everyone was looking at me. I didn't feel comfortable in my own body, constantly hiding. I hated going out in public spaces.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember even if there was certain things on at school and it wasn't your comfortable space, it might be a class that you weren't comfortable with or something, it wouldn't have to be a big change. You could just, a lot was overwhelming. Yeah.
I remember first year in high school, grade 7, I remember the first day I went in there, massive panic attack. It didn't help because being autistic, I have a massive issue with recognizing people's faces.
Yeah.
So there'll be a group of boys, group of girls, and I could not tell them apart.
And the genders, no, or the faces, the expressions?
Oh, just people. That'd be like, the guys would all have short brown hair, all of them white. Really? And it'd be like,
all right, you're a white boy, you're a white girl, there you go.
Yep, that was pretty much it. And most of the guys too were shorter than me, so it's harder to tell when they're, unable to compare. So like 2 guys who both had brown hair, a bit below my shoulder, couldn't tell them apart for the life of me.
There you go. Okay, and isn't that just so great to feel? I mean, as you say, you still have anxiety, of course, but you seem to have learnt how to kind of push through and step up. Would you say, or not really? Or
I do feel like it. There's definitely, as I've grown older, I've definitely had ways to cope with anxiety a lot better than I used to. I think also, going to see therapy has also helped. Going on medication to help with my anxiety. Stuff like that, and also having a better understanding of autism. Yeah,
absolutely. So here's a big question: how do these 2 areas interact for you? Do you think? How do you think? Does the autism make it more challenging with the transgender, or is it actually a strength? How have you experienced the 2 interacting?
This is kind of a difficult question because it's like kind of...
You don't have a reference point, do you?
Yeah, exactly. Like my life is how I lived every day of my life. Like,
I remember, if you don't mind me saying, I remember having a delightful conversation with you once when I kind of said to you, so what's it like? What's it like transitioning? And your feedback was so wonderfully Aspergic. You outlined, it was like a checklist. For example, when you buy male clothes, how there's just such a lack of selection of pants, and they have pockets you can actually use, and haircuts that are the same haircut but a lot cheaper.
Yep.
When you stand in a line, that they pay more attention to you because you're male in the line.
I remember that. Yeah, that was a great feeling.
Yeah. And you just listed them off like a multiplication table. It was just boom, 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 boom. And there was just the most delightful observations and fascinating. But the way you described them was so classically Aspergic. and I loved it. Mm-hmm. Can you think of any others? Well, we're brainstorming.
Sort of in the same sort of vein of things, not having to wait to go to the bathroom, because guys, in, out, with females you get a lot of bathroom chit-chat, which I despise. I think I've mentioned to you before about that.
I've always wondered why. Why are guys quick and good? I've always wondered if it's because guys don't wash their hands.
Oh. The good thing about the men's bathroom, there's always soap.
No way.
Yep.
Because they don't use it.
Yep.
That's hilarious.
I remember going to the female's bathroom where you'd pump against the little soap thing on the wall, like, nope, empty today. Oh, well, you just wash your hands with water and, dry them off in your pants. Go to the male's bathroom, like, yep, it's full. I remember there's only been one occasion where the soap wasn't full, and it was probably because it wasn't refilled or something.
Wow. So the men go in, they whip it out, pee and walk out. That's it.
I'm pretty sure. I remember one time I was washing my hands, and in the mirror I see a guy walking out of the bathroom behind me. I'm like,
wash your hands,
dude.
buddy. COVID, come on. And whereas women, they all go into their cubicles, they take their moment in the cubicles, they come out, they check their hair, and they wash their hands.
Yep.
I personally hate talking in the bathroom.
I find it such a weird spot to converse.
I'm not in the mood. And I really can't stand it when I go to the bathroom and women talk to me, and often it's quite an in-depth conversation as well. And I'm, how can you shut that down quickly? I can't stand it.
Oh, something my mum does. She talks on the phone when going to the toilet, and I hate that. I can't imagine being on the phone to someone and hearing them pee in the background. Ugh.
I once was on a phone session, seriously, and I'm on this phone session and I hear this water, the sound of water, and I'm thinking, okay, is this person pouring water or peeing? And I'm like, please be drinking water. Please be, please. And then I heard the flush. And I'm like, oh my gosh, someone's just taken a psychology session to the toilet.
Yep.
They could just put me on hold for a few minutes. I'll be fine. Yeah, no, no, I don't know. Anything else that jumps out at you? You've got this really interesting perspective, between the genders. And but also from the autism spectrum, which I think is just so beautifully matter of fact.
Being transgender has definitely given me an entire new view on how the world treats women.
Tell me about that.
So I remember this was right after I transitioned, but I hadn't really done anything to bind my chest, which is when I make it flat using a special sort of bra. And I remember I hadn't bothered binding that day because it was giving me trouble breathing. I went to the shop. And I was standing behind my mum, and this old guy, I think he runs the shop, he came up to me. He looks me down, he looks me up. He goes, "You're a tall girl, aren't you?" And he just walks off. Yep, that was it.
Thanks for the comment. I don't need that, thank you.
Yeah, I was just kind of like, sure am.
What else have you noticed? Anything concerning about how women are treated? Or advantageous with how men are treated, or negative even?
I noticed that given the chance between talking to a man and talking to a woman, shop people will always talk to the man.
Yeah.
So I was going out to the shops with my cousin, and my cousin, her dad has been adopted into my family, so she looks nothing like me. She's 5 foot tall, blonde hair,
Yeah.
And we were kind of standing in the shop, and I just grabbed a pair of socks to give to my sister, and the shop clerk walks over, and she starts talking to me. I'm not responding. I'm just kind of nodding there awkwardly. My cousin starts responding to her. She keeps talking to me. She's like, the story about people wearing socks at McDonald's or something. And, she's going full out. And I'm not responding at all. And she's like, okay, so you want to buy an extra pair of socks? I was like, I don't know. And she's like, oh, typical man. And she walks off.
Really? And there's your, female person with you wanting to talk and not getting a word in.
Yep, pretty much. And we both kind of looked at each other like, what the hell?
Yeah. I've noticed actually when my husband John and I go in together, people will often direct to John with regard to if we're ordering or if we're getting drinks or, yeah. And John looks at me and goes, no, ask her. I'm up there. Yeah, it's interesting. It's very, very interesting. Okay, now let's talk about transitioning physically. Tell me about that journey. What's that process been like for you? You talked about a binder. Now, as I understand, that's kind of like a garment that you wear to make your chest area flatter. Is it uncomfortable?
It can be. So when you get a binder, you have to be really careful to make sure you don't get one that's too tight because that can cause rib damage.
Really?
Yeah, but the entire point of it is that it compresses your breasts down so it looks closer to a male chest. It doesn't become completely flat because not even male chests are completely flat.
No.
But it definitely helps with dysphoria, which is when you're upset with how your body appears, typically relating to gender.
Yeah, so very uncomfortable if you're going around looking like you've got female breasts. Doesn't match with you.
Yeah, but if you wear it safely and you practice safely and you're meant to only wear it for 8 hours every day, then you shouldn't have any issues with that unless you already have asthma or something.
Sure. Do you have any problems with it or are you comfortable?
Sometimes I do have slight breathing issues, but I think that's because I've been gaining weight.
Okay, well, let's keep talking about that. So what else have you done?
Recently, actually, when was that? I think it was maybe close to the start of this year. I started Hormonal Transition, which is when I take special medication to increase my level of testosterone, which is what makes men hairy, have a deep voice and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And for me, it also causes other changes. For me specifically, it means I suddenly started gaining weight.
Yeah.
So I used to be quite underweight before I started, and then afterwards I started, got a bit of a belly, body hair everywhere like that. And don't know where I was going with that.
Yeah. And your face around your chin area, it's kind of filled out a little bit more. So, more of a masculine face rather than you had more finer features before.
A few people have mentioned that, but I haven't noticed it myself. But I guess I see myself in the mirror every day. It's harder.
Yeah. Pre and post photos would be interesting.
I do actually have photos from the past 250 days, I think. I take a photo every day. Yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Other things is stuff like facial hair. Oh, it's like going through puberty again. Sometimes I go through emotional roller coasters. Acne is terrible.
Is it?
Uh-huh.
I don't see that anyway, just saying.
I've never had bad acne, thankfully.
Right, so your idea of bad acne is probably...
Actually having acne.
Having any acne, okay. And your voice is lower.
Actually with my voice, that used to be a massive issue with me because I always looked androgynous, so like I could be male or female. And, people would come up to be like, oh, how you doing, sir, or something like that. And then I'd be like, oh, hey, I'm good. And they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, miss.
Because you'd have that high voice,
Yeah. And even after starting hormones and my voice becoming deeper, I still have the female pattern of speaking. So,
okay, wow, that is a fascinating conversation. Can I say I don't know if you know this, but my background is academia. And so I've marked too many essays in my life. And I could tell if it was written by a female or a male, usually.
Okay.
Are you surprised to hear that?
Not really. I mean, more so with writing pattern, but if I thought about it, no, not really.
The men would write in a much more direct, like boom, boom, boom. The female would start a paragraph with an introductory kind of like explanation and be much more kind of paragraphy in getting to points and then be summing up, not in an apologetic way, but in a cushioning way. Whereas the males was just far more, not bullet pointy, but a bit more like that.
A bit more aggressive with how they...
Yeah, direct. And it's interesting because, I've been a psychologist for 20 years and I've had to write, again, way too many reports in my life. And I've started to increasingly write in a male way. Boom, 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 boom. Just because I've become more of a professional in that way.
Yeah, that's
very interesting.
Again, linking back to that view, it's definitely the fact that people born male are definitely given more of that confidence, like that sort of boys will be boys sort of view.
What can you elaborate on that? What do you think? Is it a preference for maleness? Is it like girls are, oh, you beautiful girl, and boys are, oh, you clever boy.
Well, I'm sure everyone could see this. It's so obvious and blaring in like literally every situation. But how do I word this? I just had an idea as well. Okay, well, I had another idea, but okay, this one, commercializing, it'll always be Superman's wife and Superman, stuff like that. It'll be, you have, for females, it's the eventual, you'll gain dependence with the male, and the males, it's you'll grow up to be strong, powerful, rich, and stuff like that. And it's definitely, I remember now.
Yeah.
We just live in a very male-focused society. Like, when you think about graffiti, people, scribble penises on the wall. It's never, vaginas or boobs or something like that.
Well, it might be boobs for the men, but not in that same bravado kind of way of...
No, I've never really seen, like, boob graffiti. It's always, the sloppy, two balls and a penis on top.
Yeah, I'll give you that. That's very true, actually. Just haven't spent much time thinking about graffiti myself, but you're absolutely right, yeah.
Well, it's definitely the focus on the penis, stuff like that, masculinity. It's all very, like, that's just the focus of everything, even if, focus of everything, and... It's sort of viewed as normal to talk about. You have dick jokes, you have, penis jokes. You're like, oh, my penis length is blah, blah, blah and whatever. But with females, it's considered more of a forbidden topic.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Talking about sexuality with females, it's a lot more laid back. You're not meant to talk about it. It's very a hidden part, which definitely plays into females being less confident in how they act.
Yeah, and of course, the whole area of we have men who are off having lots of sex, they're studs and women are sluts, that whole area. And even, there's a whole conversation we could go into. It's interesting, as you know, I've got 5 boys, right? We've got 5 boys, sorry. And I grew up in a very gender-neutral household. It was a bit of a learning curve to discover sexism when I was in high school. And when I tell people I've got 5 kids, they're like, yep, wow, that's great. I'm like, yep, good. And then I say 5 boys, and their response is, wow, that's, wow. That's, it's almost like, you've got the lotto, or wow, that's. And I was talking to a friend who has got 5 girls, and her response is, oh, you poor darling.
I
routinely.
Yeah.
And she gets offended all the time. Oh, gosh. She gets, oh, that's horrible. Not quite that's horrible. Oh, my gosh, how do you manage it? Oh, wow. It's not like, yeah, well done, And I don't pin my hat on having boys, just kind of, roll the dice, and that's the way it worked out. It's very interesting. So you're kind of like this living kind of sociological experiment, aren't you?
Yep. I'm seeing both sides of the double-sided glass, I suppose, seeing right in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Any challenges with the autism and the transgender?
I suppose...
Again, you don't know what's relative, but anyway.
Yeah. Just judging of how other people talk about it. I view gender in a very abstract way. So it's kind of that thing of taking things too literally or being able to abstract things very well. And I think a lot of people have issue with that because they say that sex and gender are always equal, but gender is a lot more abstract. It's social roles, it's culture. Western gender roles are completely different from Asian gender roles, stuff like that. And the way that females in, Indigenous Australia, let's say, or ancient Rome, ancient Greece, they all played completely different roles from one another.
So it's very culturally narrated, I guess.
Yep. And I just, again, me being autistic, I just don't understand how people can just say, there's only male, there's only female, you have to stick to that, when there's so many cultures that are thousands of years old that have had third genders and stuff like that.
Is that true?
Yep.
What sort of language? I mean, I don't speak these different languages, but what kind of language have you heard as this third gender?
So specifically cultures, the one I can name off the top of my head because I learned about recently was Hawaiian Culture. There's a third gender.
Right.
And they're seen as sort of overseers, caretakers of children. They'd be considered very wise as opposed to, the females and the males would do their own separate thing. There was another one in Norse, ancient Norse kind of areas. I can't name the spot off the top of my head.
That's okay. I wouldn't know it anyway.
You're
impressing me already.
A lot of their gods were considered quite gender defiant. So
defiant.
The main god, Odin, I think it was, he was male and he practiced a type of magic that was considered only for females.
Right.
So he would definitely be this kind of like male overseeing figure who was very dominant, very powerful, and he practiced a feminine sort of magic, which was kind of non-binary in its own sense, which actually a lot of gods don't have genders assigned to them.
There you go. Case in point.
There was also another one, Loki, who was gender fluid, so he actively changed his gender. One story he would be a male human, another a female horse. Messed up story that came out of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Whole story there.
Yeah. And sort of ideas like that.
Wow. Tell you what, as we're wrapping up, can you tell me if there's anyone listening, and they're starting their journey, you've had 3 journeys. Where are we going? We've got the autism journey. Then you came out as being gay, which was female attracted to females, and then you were transgender, so you were male attracted to females. So suddenly you were heterosexual. Am I getting that right? Isn't that? Well, there you go.
Yep.
So you've had a lot of barriers to work through, educate people around you, and all of it has been you fighting to be who you are. And I mean, what better purpose, I think, in our own personal development. So I guess we've got a very broad audience here, apart from the general public who are just learning, and interested. So anyone who's starting off on any of this, they know within themselves they're not being true to who they are. any ideas of how to get things started or how to find the courage?
Well, with that, it's very hard to give advice, because the advice I'd give to someone who might be, let's say, like 13 coming out as trans versus someone who might be 80 coming out as trans, you have to give very different advice. For example, if I was to talk to someone younger, number one priority, make sure it's safe. Even if you're looking at getting an autism diagnosis, you have to make sure that your family won't kick you out for being trans or for being neurodivergent, because there's a lot of
Neurodivergent as in autism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of kind of demonizing around religion and autism. So people think that autistic people might be possessed or something like that. So number one thing,
wow, I've
look for
seriously,
safety.
I hear you. I hear you loud and clear that, everyone first and foremost needs to feel safe. I haven't come across that with autism and with any kind of
I think that's
religious...
more so the extreme religion.
Yeah, well, that'd be horrible. Okay, so first of all, check that you're safe. Okay.
Yeah, but if you're in a safe kind of situation and, you think you're in a situation, it's just kind of go for it. You're not losing anything by, just going for it, and you're probably losing more if you just hold back and just kind of let this settle and brew inside of you. You need to learn how to change your mentality to sort of realize that even if you conform to every social standard, you're the nicest person, kind to everyone, you're going to have people who are going to judge you.
There you go. And it's their problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, and hopefully they wake up for their benefit.
Yep, and it's easier if someone doesn't support you and you've tried, it's easier just to go, nope, out of my life now.
You don't deserve me.
Mm-hmm.
Good on you. Well, I've really enjoyed this. It's been very, very interesting, and I don't mean to sound cliche, but I really admire you. And I did meet you when you were that shy person in the shadow, and now you're an advocate. Here you are, and it's just wonderful. So, thank you so much. It's just great. All right. So everybody, if you're wanting to catch me out and about, website KirstenHunterAuthor.com, Facebook Kirsten Hunter Author, Instagram Kirsten Hunter Author, and Twitter Kirsten Hunter AU. The YouTube channel, I don't know if you know that exists, Psych in Your Car, and the podcast, Here We Are, Signpost for Living with Dr. Kirsten Hunter. And jump on and subscribe and share this around. It'd be just wonderful. So, Tobias, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming along, and we'll keep having fun.
Yep.
Take care, sweetie.
Yep, you too.
Bye.
Bye.